Madison Hayes was bleeding through her dress in a packed courtroom when his mistress started laughing. 8 months pregnant, collapsing in front of everyone who'd whispered about her for 6 months. But that laugh, that was the moment everything changed. Because when the judge slammed those DNA results on the table, they didn't just reveal who the father was. They exposed a conspiracy so twisted, even the attorneys went pale. A $3 million life insurance policy, search histories about pregnancy deaths, and a mistress carrying someone else's baby. Before we dive into this shocking story, hit that like button if you're ready for the truth, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe because you won't believe where this goes. Let's begin. The moment Madison Hayes felt the warm wetness spreading across her thighs, she knew something was terribly wrong. But it wasn't until she heard Amber Laurent's high-pitched laugh echoing through the courthouse corridor that she realized this day would change everything. Madison gripped the edge of the defense table, her knuckles white against the polished wood. She was 8 months pregnant, her belly swollen with the baby she'd tried for 3 years to conceive. The baby her husband Blake now claimed might not even be his. "Your Honor," Blake's attorney was saying, his voice smooth and practiced, "my client believes Mrs. Thornton has demonstrated a pattern of instability that makes her unsuitable for primary custody." Madison felt the wetness seep through her maternity dress. Not spotting, not the normal discharge her doctor had said was fine. Actual bleeding, the kind that meant something was very, very wrong. Her attorney, Victoria Price, leaned close. "Madison, she whispered urgently. "Are you okay?" Madison shook her head, barely able to form words. "I'm bleeding." In the gallery behind them, Amber sat in the second row, her red dress too tight, too bright, like she wanted everyone to look at her. She leaned forward, her manicured hand covering her mouth, but her eyes were smiling. She was enjoying this. The cramping started then, low and deep, like a fist clenching inside her belly. Madison pressed one hand against her stomach. Her daughter kicked once, twice, hard. "Your Honor," Victoria stood abruptly. "I need a moment with my client." "Miss Price," the opposing attorney objected. "I have the floor." "Your Honor, this is urgent." Judge Ellen Crawford sighed and removed her reading glasses. "Very well, 5-minute recess." The gavel came down, the sound cracking through the courtroom like a gunshot. Madison tried to stand. Her legs felt like water. Victoria caught her elbow. "How much?" Victoria asked quietly. "I don't know. I can feel it." Victoria turned to the bailiff. "We need an ambulance." The word cut through the courtroom chatter. Ambulance. Everyone stopped talking. Everyone turned to look. Madison felt their eyes on her. Dozens of them, judging, measuring, waiting to see what would happen next. Amber's voice carried clearly from the gallery. "Oh my God, is she actually—" The gavel slammed down again, harder this time. "Miss Laurent," Judge Crawford said sharply, "one more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Amber pressed her lips together, but Madison could see it, the smile trying to break through, the satisfaction in her eyes. Madison looked across the courtroom at Blake, her husband of 12 years, father of the baby currently fighting for life inside her body. He sat beside his attorney, his face carefully blank, not worried, not concerned, just calculating, like he was adding up numbers in his head, trying to figure out how this would affect him. The bailiff spoke into his radio. Madison heard the words but couldn't quite process them. The cramping intensified. She breathed through it, in through her nose, out through her mouth. "Grace," Victoria said gently, using her first name for the first time since they'd met. "We need to get you to the hospital." "No." Madison straightened, ignoring the pain. "The DNA results. They're scheduled for today. I'm not leaving." "Madison, you're bleeding." "I know what I'm doing." Madison pressed both hands against her belly. Her daughter kicked again. "Alive. Fighting. I've waited 6 months for this. 6 months of whispers, of people looking at me like I'm a liar, like I'm the one who destroyed everything. I'm not walking away now." The courtroom doors opened. 2 EMTs entered, one carrying a medical bag, the other pushing a gurney. The female EMT, young, maybe 25, knelt beside Madison's chair. "Ma'am, I'm Sarah. Can you tell me what's happening?" "I'm 8 months pregnant. I started bleeding about 10 minutes ago. There's cramping, low, it comes and goes. Any bleeding during this pregnancy before today? No. Sarah looked up at her partner. Something passed between them, something that made Madison's stomach drop even further. We need to get you to the hospital, Sarah said. If you're experiencing placental abruption, every minute matters. Placental abruption. The words Madison had read about at 3 in the morning. During one of those nights when sleep wouldn't come, when the weight of everything pressed down until she couldn't breathe. After the hearing, Madison said, "Ma'am, I can't force you to go, but I understand the risks." Madison looked at Judge Crawford. "Your Honor, I'd like to proceed." Judge Crawford leaned forward. "Mrs. Thornton, I'm not going to put your health at risk. The DNA results were supposed to be presented today. I need to hear them." "They can wait." "No," Madison said, her voice stronger now, clearer. "They can't." The courtroom was completely silent. Even Amber had stopped smirking. Madison felt the wetness spreading, cooling against her skin. She knew what it looked like. She didn't have to see it. Everyone else was seeing it. The dark stains spreading across her dress, the evidence of her body failing her at the worst possible moment. But she wasn't leaving. Not until everyone in this room heard the truth. 48 hours before Madison's world would explode in that courtroom. She stood in the nursery of their penthouse apartment, folding tiny clothes and dreaming of the future. The room was painted a soft yellow, gender neutral, because they'd wanted to be surprised. Cream-colored curtains filtered the afternoon sunlight. A white crib stood against the far wall, already assembled, waiting. Baby shower invitations sat in neat stacks on the changing table, ready to be mailed. Madison smoothed her hand over her belly, feeling her daughter move. After 3 years of trying, of negative tests and doctor appointments and wondering what was wrong with her body, she was finally here, 8 months pregnant, almost done. The shower turned off in the master bathroom. Blake would be out soon, getting ready for his dinner meeting. Another late night at the investment bank. He'd been working so much lately, but Madison understood. They needed the income, especially with the baby coming. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Madison walked over, planning to bring it to him. The screen lit up with a notification. A.L. Can't wait to see you tonight. The baby kicked today. Madison stared at the message. Read it again. And again. Her brain couldn't quite process what she was seeing. The baby kicked today. But their baby was here, in Madison's belly. So whose baby was kicking? Her hands shook as she picked up the phone. It wasn't locked. Blake never locked his phone around her. Why would he? She'd never had a reason to look before. She opened the messages, scrolled up, and up, and up. Months of messages, hundreds of them, photos, videos, and ultrasound pictures, dated 4 months ago. A woman's face she recognized, Amber Laurent, Blake's executive assistant, the one he'd hired 18 months ago, the one Madison had met at the company Christmas party, who'd smiled sweetly and said, "You two are so lucky to have each other." Madison's vision blurred. She sat down hard on the kitchen stool, still holding the phone, still scrolling through evidence of a life she didn't know existed. Blake, 3 months ago, I love you. We're going to have a beautiful life together. Amber, what about Madison Blake? I'm handling it. After the baby's born, we'll figure everything out. The bathroom door opened. Blake walked out, towel around his waist, hair wet. He saw Madison with his phone and stopped. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You weren't supposed to see that yet, Blake said finally. Yet, not I'm sorry, not I can explain, just yet. How long? Madison's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Blake crossed his arms. Madison, let's talk about this rationally. How long have you been sleeping with your assistant? About 18 months? 18 months, a year and a half. The entire time they'd been trying to conceive. The entire time Madison had been tracking her ovulation, taking her temperature every morning, crying in bathroom stalls over negative pregnancy tests. She's pregnant, Madison said, still staring at the phone. Yes. 4 months. Yes. Madison looked up at him, really looked at him. This man she'd married 12 years ago, this man she'd built a life with, this stranger wearing her husband's face. We've been trying for 3 years, Madison said slowly. 3 years of fertility treatments and tests and wondering what was wrong with me. And you got her pregnant in 4 months. Madison, is it mine? The question burst out of her, sharp and desperate. This baby I'm carrying, is it yours? Blake's face hardened. I don't know. That's why we need to do a DNA test. The words hit her like a physical blow. He didn't know. He'd planted doubt in her mind about her own baby, about her own body, about 3 years of faithfulness while he'd been lying the entire time. I never cheated on you, Bess, Madison said. Not once, not ever. You know that. Do I? You're always working late, always meeting with clients. Don't. Madison stood up, fury replacing the shock. Don't you dare turn this around on me. You're the one who had an affair. You're the one who got another woman pregnant. You're the one who's been lying for 18 months. I made a mistake. For 18 months, that's not a mistake. Blake, that's a choice. Every time you texted her, every time you met her, every time you came home and kissed me, hello, while her perfume was still on your clothes, those were choices. Blake ran a hand through his wet hair. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. Why her? Why not? Why did you keep pretending we had a marriage when you were building a life with someone else? Because our marriage was already over, Blake said, his voice cold now, the mask slipping. It died the moment we couldn't have kids. Everything after that was just going through the motions. Madison felt something break inside her, something fundamental. But I am having a baby, she said quietly. I'm having your baby right now. Maybe. We'll see what the DNA test says. You think I cheated? I think it's possible. Based on what? Based on the fact that you were desperate to get pregnant and I was busy, and there are a lot of ways for a desperate woman to make that happen. The accusation hung in the air between them. Madison looked at this man, this person she'd loved for 12 years, and realized she didn't know him at all. Maybe she never had. Get out, she said. Madison, get out of my house. It's my house, too. Then I'll leave. Madison grabbed her purse from the counter, her keys, her phone. She walked toward the door. Where are you going? She stopped, turned back. Anywhere you're not. And Blake, I want a divorce. And when that data test proves you're the father, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you accused me of cheating when I was the only one being faithful. Remember that you destroyed our marriage for nothing. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam. Madison made it to the elevator before she started crying. Made it to her car before she called Harper, her best friend. Made it to Harper's apartment building before she let herself think about what came next. Because this wasn't just the end of her marriage. This was the beginning of a war. Harper Reed opened her apartment door at 11 o'clock that night to find Madison standing in the hallway. Eyes red, mascara streaked, still in the designer maternity dress she'd worn to their anniversary dinner 3 nights ago, back when she'd still thought they had something worth celebrating. He's been cheating on me for 18 months, Madison said without preamble. His assistant is pregnant. He wants a day test because he thinks I might have cheated too. Harper pulled her inside. I'm going to kill him. You'll have to get in line. They sat on Harper's couch, the same couch where Madison had cried 3 years ago when the first fertility treatment failed, where she'd celebrated 2 years ago when the doctor said there was still hope, where she'd planned her baby shower just last month, believing her life was finally coming together. Tell me everything, Harper said. So Madison did. The text message, the ultrasound photos, the 18 months of lies, Blake's cold accusation about her fidelity, his statement that their marriage had died the moment they couldn't have kids. Except you can have kids, Harper pointed out. You're literally pregnant right now. He doesn't think it's his. Madison, you've never even looked at another man. Everyone knows that. You're obsessed with him. You were, before all this. The past tense hurt. Madison pressed a hand to her belly, feeling her daughter move. What am I going to do? First, you're going to sleep here tonight. Tomorrow, you're calling a lawyer, and you're going to destroy him in court. But Madison wasn't thinking about court yet. She was thinking about 18 months. About all the times Blake had said he was working late. All the business trips. All the time she'd blamed herself for their problems, for the distance between them, for not being enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from Blake. "We need to talk about this rationally. I'll be home tomorrow. We can work something out." Madison showed Harper the message. "Block him," Harper said immediately. "I can't. We need to communicate about the divorce. Then only communicate through lawyers." "Madison, listen to me. Men like Blake don't just cheat. They plan. They strategize. He's already thinking about how to spin this, how to make you look bad, how to protect his assets. You need to be 3 steps ahead." Madison knew Harper was right. Harper had been through a brutal divorce 2 years ago. She knew how ugly things could get. The next morning, Madison called Victoria Price. Victoria had a reputation as the best divorce attorney in the city. Former prosecutor, ruthless in court, expensive as hell. Madison didn't care about the cost. She wanted someone who would fight. They met that afternoon in Victoria's downtown office. Sleek glass and steel, views of the city skyline, everything designed to project power and success. "Tell me what happened," Victoria said, pulling out a legal pad. Madison told the story again. It didn't get easier with repetition. Victoria took notes, her expression neutral. When Madison finished, Victoria set down her pen. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria said. "Blake is going to file for divorce first. He's going to request a paternity test. He's going to claim you were unstable, possibly unfaithful, definitely unsuitable for primary custody. How do you know? Because that's what I would do if I were representing him. Control the narrative. Make you defend yourself. Put you on the back foot from the beginning. Can he do that? He can try. Whether he succeeds depends on how well we counter. Do you have any evidence of the affair?" Madison pulled out her phone, showed Victoria the screenshots she'd taken of Blake's messages with Amber. Victoria smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator spotting prey. "This is good," Victoria said. "Very good. Authenticated messages, timestamps, clear evidence of an ongoing affair. We can use this. What about the paternity test? We'll agree to it. You know it's his baby. Let him look like an idiot when the results come back. But Madison, I need to warn you. This is going to get ugly. Blake will attack your character, your mental state, your fitness as a mother. He'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and present it to the judge. Can you handle that?" Madison thought about her daughter, about the future she wanted for her, about teaching her that you don't let people destroy you without fighting back. "Yes," Madison said. "I can handle it." But she was wrong. She had no idea what Blake was planning. No idea how far he would go. No idea that agreeing to this fight meant agreeing to be broken into pieces before she could be made whole again. 3 days later, Blake filed for divorce. But he didn't just file. He held a press conference. Called Madison emotionally unstable. Implied she'd been unfaithful. Said he had serious concerns about the paternity of the child she claims is mine. Madison's phone exploded with calls and texts, clients canceling projects, friends asking if it was true, her mother crying, asking what she'd done wrong. Madison watched the press conference from Harper's apartment, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. "He's destroying me," she whispered. Harper put an arm around her shoulders. "No, he's showing the world who he really is. And when we prove he's lying, everyone will remember this moment. Everyone will know what kind of man Blake Thornton really is." But right then, in that moment, Madison didn't feel like she was winning. She felt like she was drowning. And the worst part was knowing this was just the beginning. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Madison's life. Blake didn't just file for divorce. He launched a full-scale assault on her reputation, her sanity, and her credibility. It started small. A leaked email to a gossip blog suggesting Madison had been mentally unstable during the marriage. Then a former colleague of Blake's went on a podcast, casually mentioning that Madison had seemed obsessed with getting pregnant, almost desperately so. The implication was clear: desperate enough to do anything, desperate enough to cheat. Madison's design clients started canceling. First 2, then 10. She lost a contract for a luxury hotel renovation worth $200,000. The client's lawyer sent a polite email about wanting to avoid controversy during this time. Harper was furious. They're destroying your business. Blake is destroying my business, Madison corrected. She was sitting on Harper's couch, her laptop open, watching another client's email arrive. He knows exactly what he's doing, Victoria called that afternoon with worse news. Blake's attorney contacted me. They're requesting full financial disclosure. They want to see every bank account, every credit card, every transaction for the last 3 years. Why? They're looking for evidence you were planning to leave him, evidence you were hiding money, evidence of anything they can use against you. I wasn't hiding anything. I know, but they're going to make it look like you were Madison. I need to tell you something else. Blake froze your joint bank accounts this morning. Madison's stomach dropped. He can't do that. He filed an emergency motion claiming you were draining marital assets. It's not true, obviously, but the judge granted a temporary freeze until the hearing next week. Victoria, I don't have access to any money. Everything we have is joint. My business account, my credit cards. Everything runs through those accounts. I'm filing a counter motion today. We'll get you emergency funds. But Madison, this is going to be a problem. Blake has his own accounts, his own income. He's cut you off deliberately. After the call ended, Madison checked her wallet, $73 in cash. One credit card that was probably already declined, a tank of gas in her car. She was 8 months pregnant, jobless, and functionally broke. That evening, she tried to buy groceries. The card was declined. She stood at the register, feeling the eyes of everyone behind her in line, and wanted to disappear. Harper paid for the groceries when Madison called her, crying in the parking lot. This is temporary, Harper kept saying. Victoria will fix this. You'll get access to funds. This is just Blake being vindictive. But it didn't feel temporary. It felt like drowning, like everything Madison had built over 12 years was being systematically destroyed by a man who'd promised to love and protect her. The next day, Blake's attorney filed another motion, this one requesting that Madison undergo psychological evaluation before being granted any custody or visitation rights. Victoria called immediately. Do not respond to this publicly. Do not post anything on social media. Do not talk to anyone except me and Harper. Blake is baiting you. He wants you to look unstable. I'm not unstable. I know. But grief looks like instability to people who want to believe you're broken. So we're going to be strategic. We're going to be calm. We're going to let Blake hang himself with his own rope. But that night, Madison broke down. She was alone in Harper's guest room, looking at the ultrasound photo of her daughter, when the cramping started. Not terrible. Just enough to be concerning. She called Dr. Sarah Bennett, her obstetrician. Come in immediately. Dr. Bennett said, don't drive yourself. Harper drove her to the hospital. They ran tests, monitored the baby's heartbeat, checked Madison's blood pressure. Dr. Bennett's face was serious when she came back with the results. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. You're showing early signs of preeclampsia. Madison, you need to reduce your stress levels immediately. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I understand, but if you don't take care of yourself, you could lose this baby. Or worse, do you understand what I'm saying? The stress is literally threatening your life and your daughter's life. Madison understood. She just didn't know how to stop it. How to stop Blake from attacking her. How to stop the world from watching her fall apart. How to stop feeling like everything she'd ever been was being stripped away piece by piece. They kept her in the hospital for 3 days, monitored her constantly, gave her medications to lower her blood pressure, made her stay on bed rest. Blake didn't visit once. Didn't call, didn't send flowers. Nothing. But Amber did. Amber sent a bouquet with a card thinking of you during this difficult time. A.L. Madison threw the flowers in the trash. On the 3rd day, Victoria came to visit. She looked worried. I have some news, Victoria said carefully. My investigator has been looking into Blake's finances, and he's been moving money, large amounts, transferred to offshore accounts over the past 8 months before you even got pregnant. Madison's blood ran cold. How much? So far, about $400,000. That's almost half our savings. I know, Madison. There's more. Blake took out a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. We've always had life insurance. It's part of his benefits package. Not like this. He increased your policy to $3 million, separately from his company policy, and he's the sole beneficiary. The room seemed to tilt. Madison gripped the bed rails. He increased my life insurance while I was pregnant. Yes. And Madison, my investigator, found something else. Blake's search history on his work computer. He's been researching pregnancy complications, maternal mortality rates, life insurance payout timelines. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. You're saying he wanted me to die, Madison whispered. Victoria's expression was grim. I'm saying we need to take this to the police. We need to take this very, very seriously. Victoria didn't waste time. That same afternoon, while Madison was still in the hospital recovering, Victoria contacted the district attorney's office. By evening, Detective James Morrison was sitting beside Madison's hospital bed, his expression grave as he reviewed the evidence. Mrs. Thornton, Detective Morrison said carefully, I need to ask you some direct questions. Have you ever felt physically threatened by your husband? Madison shook her head. Not physically, but the emotional abuse, the gaslighting, it started months ago and I just didn't recognize it. Tell me about the life insurance policy. I didn't know about it. We had standard policies through Blake's work, death benefit of $500,000 each. I never agreed to a $3 million policy. Detective Morrison made notes. Did your husband have access to your signatures? Could he have forged documentation? He handles all our finances. I trusted him. The words tasted bitter. I signed things he put in front of me without really reading them. God, I was so stupid. You weren't stupid, Victoria said firmly. You were a wife who trusted her husband. That's not a character flaw. Detective Morrison pulled out printed pages. These are screenshots from Mr. Thornton's work computer, his search history. He laid them out one by one. Madison read them, her hands shaking. Pregnancy complications 3rd trimester. Placental abruption mortality rate. Life insurance payout after accidental death. How long until life insurance pays out? Preeclampsia death statistics. Can life insurance deny claim suspicious death? Oh my gosh, Madison whispered. He was planning it. He was actually planning for me to die. We don't know his intent yet, Detective Morrison said carefully. But combined with the offshore accounts, the policy increase, and the timing with your pregnancy, there's enough here to open an investigation. What happens now? We investigate quietly. We don't want to tip him off. Continue with the divorce proceedings as planned. Don't tell Blake or anyone else about this conversation. Can you do that? Madison nodded, though everything in her wanted to scream, wanted to call Blake and demand answers, wanted to know if he'd really been prepared to let her die for $3 million. Harper arrived after the detective left. She took one look at Madison's face and sat down heavily. It's bad, Harper said. Not a question. He researched how to kill me. Madison's voice was flat, emotionless. Shock. Probably. Or at least how to profit from my death. I don't even know which is worse. Madison. For 3 years, I blamed myself for our infertility. I tracked every cycle. I ate foods I hated because the internet said they'd help. I gave myself injections. I cried in bathrooms when I saw other women with babies. And the entire time, Blake was planning his exit strategy, planning for the insurance money he'd collect when I died. Harper moved to sit on the edge of the bed. You're not going to die, and he's going to prison. Victoria and the detective will make sure of it. But what if they can't prove it? What if it's all just suspicious coincidence? What if— Stop! Harper gripped Madison's hand. You're spiraling. I get it. But you can't fall apart now. That baby needs you fighting, not drowning. Madison looked down at her belly. Her daughter was moving, oblivious to the danger she'd been in, oblivious to her father's plans. I have to protect her, Madison said. Whatever happens in court, whatever Blake does, I have to make sure she's safe. She will be. We'll make sure of it. But Madison wasn't convinced, because in what world could a mother protect her daughter from the daughter's own father? How did you explain to a child someday that her father had considered her mother expendable, that before she was even born, she'd been part of a calculation? an equation where her mother's death equaled financial freedom. Bennett released Madison from the hospital the next morning with strict instructions: bed rest, low stress, monitoring twice weekly. Madison, Dr. Bennett said seriously, I need you to understand something. Your body is under tremendous strain. The stress, the high blood pressure, the preeclampsia symptoms, they're all warning signs. If you don't take this seriously, you could stroke out, you could have a seizure, you could go into labor prematurely. Your daughter might not survive. You might not survive. Do you understand? I understand. Then act like it. Whatever is happening in your personal life, it's not worth dying over. But that was the thing. Madison didn't have a choice about the stress. She couldn't just opt out of the divorce, out of the investigation, out of the reality that her husband might have wanted her dead. She had to survive it. She had to keep fighting. Victoria filed an emergency motion the next day, requesting that the court grant Madison temporary financial support pending the divorce hearing. She also submitted sealed evidence to the judge about the life insurance investigation, requesting enhanced security measures. Judge Crawford granted the motion. Madison received $10,000 in temporary support and a restraining order prohibiting Blake from coming within 500 feet of her or Harper's apartment. It felt like a victory, small but real. That lasted exactly 48 hours. Then Blake's attorney filed a counter motion. They were requesting that Madison undergo mandatory drug testing based on credible information that she'd been using prescription medications inappropriately during pregnancy. Victoria called, furious. It's complete nonsense. They have no evidence because there is no evidence, but they're trying to drag you through the mud, make you defend yourself against baseless accusations. So what do? You take the drug test, you pass it, and we add it to our defamation lawsuit. We're suing him. Oh yes, for slander, emotional distress, and financial abuse. By the time I'm done with Blake Thornton, he's going to wish he'd just signed the divorce papers and walked away quietly. Madison wanted to believe it, wanted to believe justice would prevail, that truth would win, that good people got happy endings. But she'd believed in Blake for 12 years. She'd believed in their marriage, their future, their love. She'd been wrong about all of it, so maybe she was wrong about this too. Maybe monsters didn't always lose. Maybe sometimes they won. That night, alone in Harper's guest room, Madison let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since everything started. Not quiet tears or controlled sobs, full body, gasping, world-ending grief. She cried for the marriage she'd lost, for the man she'd loved who'd never really existed, for 3 years of trying to have a baby while her husband was building a life with someone else, for the little girl inside her who would grow up without a father because her father was a sociopath, and she cried because she was tired, bone deep, soul-crushing tired, tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of pretending she wasn't terrified that Blake would somehow win, would take her daughter, would destroy what little she had left. But in the morning she got up, she went to her drug test. She passed, of course. She met with Victoria to prepare for the preliminary hearing scheduled for the following week. She kept fighting because that's what mothers do. Even when they're broken, even when they're scared, even when they don't know if they're strong enough to win, they fight anyway. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Madison woke up that day feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Victoria had spent the previous week building their case. They had the screenshots of Blake's messages with Amber. They had financial records showing the offshore transfers. They had the life insurance documents. They had Blake's search history. Most importantly, they had Madison's spotless record faithful wife, successful businesswoman, no criminal history, no substance abuse, no mental health crises. We're going to win today, Victoria said confidently as they walked into the courthouse. Not the whole case, obviously, but we're going to get you financial relief. We're going to get the paternity question settled, and we're going to make Blake look like exactly what he is: a lying, cheating fraud. Harper squeezed Madison's hand. You've got this. Madison took a deep breath and walked into the courtroom. Blake was already there, sitting at the defense table with his attorney. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her existence. Amber Laurent sat in the gallery, 4 months pregnant now, her belly just starting to show. She wore a cream-colored dress, tasteful and expensive. When Madison walked past, Amber smiled. Sweet, poisonous. Madison ignored her. She sat beside Victoria, folded her hands on the table, and waited for Judge Crawford to enter. The hearing started simply enough. Blake's attorney presented their case. Madison was unstable, possibly unfaithful, potentially unfit for custody. They wanted full financial disclosure, mandatory psychological evaluation, and supervised visitation only if DNA tests confirmed Madison's baby was Blake's. Victoria dismantled it piece by piece. She showed the messages between Blake and Amber. She showed the timeline of the affair. She showed that Madison had never been anything but faithful, that her business had been thriving until Blake's smear campaign, that she had no history of mental illness or instability. Your Honor, Victoria said, Mr. Thornton is not seeking custody because he believes his wife is unfit. He's seeking custody because he's angry she discovered his affair, and he wants to punish her for refusing to stay silent about it. Judge Crawford looked at Blake. Mr. Thornton, is this true? Were you having an affair with Miss Laurent? Blake stood. Yes, Your Honor, but that's not, and Miss Laurent is pregnant with your child. She claims it's mine. Yes. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Crawford's expression hardened. So, to be clear, Judge Crawford said, you were having an affair. You impregnated your mistress, and you're now challenging the paternity of your wife's child based on what evidence? Exactly. Blake's attorney jumped in. Your Honor, my client has reasonable doubt based on what did you see, Mrs. Thornton with another man? Do you have any witnesses? Any evidence at all besides your client's suspicions? No, Your Honor, but then I'm ordering the paternity test. We'll settle this question once and for all. Judge Crawford turned to Madison. Mrs. Thornton, do you consent to DNA testing? Yes, Your Honor. Madison's voice was steady. I know my daughter is Blake's. Let the test prove it. Good. The test will be conducted immediately after this hearing. Results within 72 hours. Judge Crawford looked at Victoria. Miss Price, I understand you have additional evidence to present. Yes, Your Honor. Victoria stood, pulling out documents. We'd like to introduce evidence of Mr. Thornton's financial misconduct, specifically the unauthorized transfer of $400,000 in marital assets to offshore accounts, done without Mrs. Thornton's knowledge or consent. Blake's attorney objected immediately. Your Honor, those transfers were legitimate business investments. Then Mr. Thornton should have no problem explaining them under oath, Victoria said smoothly. We also have evidence of a $3 million life insurance policy Mr. Thornton took out on Mrs. Thornton without her knowledge, making himself the sole beneficiary. The courtroom went silent. Judge Crawford leaned forward. Is this true, Mr. Thornton? Blake stood again, his face carefully neutral. Yes, but it was standard financial planning. We were starting a family. I wanted to ensure a $3 million policy when your joint policies were already $500,000 each. Judge Crawford's skepticism was evident. That's not standard. Mr. Thornton, that's excessive. I wanted to protect our daughter's future by making yourself the beneficiary. Not a trust for the child, Victoria interjected. Your Honor, we believe this policy, combined with Mr. Thornton's internet search history regarding pregnancy complications and maternal mortality, suggests something far more sinister than financial planning. Madison watched Blake's face. For the first time since this started, she saw fear flicker in his eyes. Judge Crawford addressed both attorneys. I'm going to order a full financial audit. All accounts, all transfers, all policies. Everything is frozen until we can determine what's marital property and what's separate. Mr. Thornton, you're not to touch any joint assets or accounts. Do you understand? Oh, yes, Your Honor. Good, Mrs. Thornton. I'm granting you temporary spousal support of $15,000 per month, plus all medical expenses related to the pregnancy. Mr. Thornton, you'll continue paying the mortgage on the marital residence. Mrs. Thornton, you may return home if you wish. Madison felt a rush of relief so intense it made her dizzy. Money, security, access to her own home. She could breathe again. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for the paternity results and to review the financial audit. Dismissed. The gavel came down. Victoria grinned. That went even better than I expected. Harper hugged Madison carefully, mindful of her belly. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Madison believed it. For the first time in weeks, she believed things might actually work out. They left the courtroom, Victoria already planning their next moves, Harper talking about moving Madison back into the penthouse, both of them celebrating what felt like a major victory. Madison didn't see Amber Laurent following them into the courthouse bathroom. Didn't realize she wasn't alone until she heard the click of the lock on the main door. She turned. Amber stood there, blocking the exit, her hand resting on her small baby bump. Madison, Amber said sweetly, we should talk. Madison stood frozen in the courthouse bathroom, her hand instinctively moving to protect her own belly. Amber blocked the door, her expression serene, almost friendly, but her eyes were cold. You shouldn't be here, Madison said. The restraining order is against Blake, not me. Amber smiled. I just want to talk, woman to woman. We have nothing to talk about, don't we? We're both carrying Blake's children. That makes us connected. Madison felt her blood pressure rising, felt the familiar cramping start low in her belly. You need to leave. In a minute, Amber walked closer, her heels clicking on the tile floor. I wanted to tell you something. Blake didn't just cheat on you with me. There were others before me. Did you know that Madison's stomach dropped, but she kept her face neutral. I don't believe you. His previous assistant, Rebecca, he had to fire her when his boss found out. And before Rebecca, there was Emily. And before Emily, probably others I don't even know about. Amber's smile widened. You were never special to him. Madison, you were just convenient, a placeholder until someone better came along. If that's true, then you're not special either. You're just the current placeholder. For a split second, doubt flickered across Amber's face. Then it was gone, replaced by that poisonous smile. No, Amber said firmly. I'm different. Blake loves me. He's leaving you for me. Oh, he told me himself. He's using you, Madison said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Just like he used everyone else. Just like he used me. And when you're not useful anymore, he'll throw you away too. That's not going to happen. It already is. You saw what happened in that courtroom. Blake is trying to prove my baby isn't his so he doesn't have to pay child support. What makes you think he won't do the same thing to you? Amber's hand tightened on her belly. Because he actually wants my baby. He didn't want yours. The words hit like a slap. Madison felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this woman. You don't know anything about my marriage, Madison said quietly. I know Blake was miserable. I know he dreaded coming home to you. I know he called you needy, desperate, pathetic. Each word was designed to wound. Madison could feel them landing, feel the pain spreading through her chest. But she also felt something else. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. If I'm so pathetic, Madison said, stepping closer, then why are you here? Why do you feel the need to come into this bathroom and tell me how much Blake loves you? If you were secure in your relationship, you wouldn't need to convince me. You'd just be happy. Amber's smile faltered. You're scared, Madison continued, because you know, deep down, that Blake doesn't actually love you. He loves himself, and you're just another tool he's using to get what he wants. That's not true. Then why did he increase the life insurance policy on me? Why did he research pregnancy complications? Was he planning to kill me so he could be with you? Or was he planning to collect $3 million and then leave you too? Amber's face went pale. Blake wouldn't what? Kill someone for money. Are you sure about that? Because I wasn't sure either. Until I saw the evidence. The bathroom door rattled. Harper's voice came through, urgent. Madison, are you in there? The door's locked. I'm fine, Madison called back, not taking her eyes off Amber. You're not fine, Amber said, but her voice had lost its edge. She looked uncertain now, young, almost vulnerable. Blake said you were trying to destroy him. He said you were lying about everything. Of course he did. That's what liars do. They make you doubt your own reality so you can't see theirs. Madison moved toward the door. But here's something you should know. Amber, that baby you're carrying, Blake, got a vasectomy 6 months ago. Did he tell you that it was a guess? A wild, desperate guess based on the timeline of Blake's planning. But Amber's face told Madison everything she needed to know. Amber's hand flew to her mouth. No, that's not... He didn't. Ask him, Madison said. Ask him if he can even have children anymore. Ask him why he's so certain my baby isn't his, but he's so sure yours is. Madison unlocked the door and walked out, leaving Amber standing alone in the bathroom. Her face white, her whole world crumbling, just like Madison's had weeks ago. Harper grabbed Madison's arm. What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, though. Let's go home. But Madison wasn't fine, because she just lied to Amber about the vasectomy, and now that lie was going to spread. Blake would hear about it. He'd deny it. And then what, Madison? Victoria said carefully as they walked to the parking garage. What did you tell Amber in there? That Blake got a vasectomy 6 months ago? Victoria stopped walking. Did he? I don't know, it was a guess. But Victoria, think about it. He's been planning this for months. The offshore accounts, the life insurance, the affair. What if he got a vasectomy so he couldn't have any more children, so there wouldn't be any biological ties to whoever came after me? That's actually plausible and easy to prove. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm calling my investigator. If Blake had a vasectomy, there'll be medical records. They found out 3 days later. Blake had indeed had a vasectomy, 7 months ago, to be precise. Right after Madison got pregnant, which meant Amber's baby couldn't possibly be Blake's, which meant everything Amber thought she knew about her future with Blake was built on lies. And when that truth came out in court, everything was going to explode. The day of the final hearing arrived. Madison was 37 weeks pregnant now, huge and uncomfortable. Her blood pressure barely controlled, even with medication. Dr. Bennett had wanted to induce labor early, but Madison refused. She needed to be in that courtroom. She needed to see this through. Harper drove her to the courthouse. Victoria met them outside, carrying 2 briefcases full of evidence. Are you ready? Victoria asked. Madison nodded, though she felt anything but ready. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. She'd barely slept in 3 days, running through every possible scenario, every way this could go wrong. They walked into the courtroom. Blake was already there, looking tired. His attorney looked even worse. Amber sat in the gallery, but she'd moved to the other side of the room, as far from Blake as possible. Interesting. Judge Crawford entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. We're here today, Judge Crawford said, to review the paternity test results and to address the financial misconduct allegations. Miss Price, I understand you have the DNA results. Yes, Your Honor. Victoria stood, pulling out a sealed envelope. These results confirm that Blake Thornton is the biological father of Mrs. Thornton's child. 99.9% certainty. Blake's face didn't change. He'd known. Of course he'd known. The paternity challenge had never been about doubt. It had been about punishment. Mr. Thornton, Judge Crawford said, do you accept these results? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Then we can move forward with custody arrangements. Now, regarding the financial audit. That's when Madison felt it. The first cramp, deep and intense, radiating from her lower back around to her belly. She gasped, gripping the table. Victoria looked over. Madison, I'm okay. Madison whispered, just Braxton Hicks. I'm fine. But it wasn't Braxton Hicks. She knew it wasn't. The warmth spreading between her legs wasn't amniotic fluid either. It was blood. Again, just like in her nightmare. The second cramp hit harder. Madison couldn't stop the small cry that escaped. Victoria stood immediately. Your Honor, I need... Madison felt the blood now, warm and wet, soaking through her dress. She looked down and saw the dark stains spreading across the light blue fabric. Placental abruption. Dr. Bennett had warned her this could happen if her blood pressure spiked too high. From the gallery, someone laughed, high and nervous. Amber. Madison's vision blurred. She tried to stand, to leave, to get to a hospital before she collapsed, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Ambulance Victoria, Victoria was saying sharply to the bailiff. Now! Judge Crawford's gavel came down. Clear the courtroom. Medical emergency. But Madison wasn't listening anymore. She was focused on staying conscious, on breathing, on keeping her daughter alive. Because if she passed out here, if she bled out in this courtroom, Blake won. He got his $3 million. He got everything. EMTs rushed in, the same team from before. Sarah recognized Madison immediately. Mrs. Thornton, I need you to lie back. We're going to get you to the hospital. No, Madison gripped Victoria's arm. The evidence? The financial audit? I need to hear it. Madison, you're hemorrhaging. I know, but I need to hear this first. Please. Madison looked up at Judge Crawford. Your Honor, please. Just the financial evidence. Then I'll go. Judge Crawford hesitated, then nodded. Make it fast, Miss Price. Victoria pulled out documents with shaking hands. Your Honor, the financial audit revealed $400,000 transferred to offshore accounts in Blake Thornton's name. Additionally, we discovered a $3 million life insurance policy on Mrs. Thornton, taken out 7 months ago. And most significantly, we found Mr. Thornton's search history from his work computer. She read the searches aloud, each one more damning than the last. Pregnancy complications, maternal mortality, insurance payouts. Your Honor, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the chaos. We believe Blake Thornton was planning to profit from his wife's death. The courtroom went silent. Even Amber had stopped laughing. Blake stood. That's ridiculous. I was just worried about Madison. The searches were because I was concerned. Then why increase the life insurance? Victoria demanded. Why move money offshore? Why get a vasectomy 7 months ago without telling your wife? Blake's face went white. That's confidential medical. We have the records, Victoria said. You had a vasectomy 7 months ago, which means, Mr. Thornton, that Miss Laurent's baby cannot possibly be yours. Amber stood up in the gallery. What? Blake turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. Amber, this isn't the time. You got a vasectomy 7 months ago before we, Amber's voice broke. Whose baby am I carrying? The courtroom erupted. Judge Crawford's gavel came down repeatedly. Madison felt herself fading, the edges of her vision going dark. Sarah was saying something about blood pressure, about needing to leave now, but then Victoria said something that cut through everything. Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence. A recorded phone conversation between Miss Laurent and Trevor Whitmore, Mr. Thornton's business partner. They were planning to extort money from Mr. Thornton by claiming Miss Laurent's baby was his. Madison's vision cleared slightly. She looked at Amber, saw the other woman's face crumple. That's not true, Amber said, but her voice was too quiet, too uncertain. We have the recordings, Victoria said. Trevor Whitmore is the father of Miss Laurent's child. They planned to scam Blake Thornton, except Blake was running his own scam, planning to let his wife die and collect the insurance money. Blake lunged toward the gallery. Deputies grabbed him. Trevor Whitmore stood up in the back row, looking panicked. Madison felt herself slipping away. The last thing she heard before everything went dark was Judge Crawford's voice, sharp and clear. Mr. Thornton, you are under arrest. Madison woke in a hospital bed, bright lights overhead, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Harper sat beside her, holding her hand. The baby, Madison asked immediately. She's fine. You're fine. Emergency C-section. She's in the NICU, but only for observation. 7 pounds, healthy, perfect. Madison's eyes filled with tears. I missed it. I missed her birth. You were unconscious. The doctors said the placental abruption was severe. Madison, you could have died. You almost did die. But I didn't. Madison touched her belly, now flat and empty. She's really okay. She's perfect. Do you want to see her? They wheeled Madison to the NICU in her hospital bed. Through the glass, she saw her daughter, tiny, red-faced, beautiful. A nurse brought her out, placed her carefully in Madison's arms. Hi, baby, Madison whispered. I'm your mom. We made it. We both made it. Victoria arrived an hour later, looking exhausted but triumphant. Blake is in custody, Victoria said without preamble. Charged with attempted fraud, conspiracy, and they're investigating for attempted murder. Trevor Whitmore was arrested too. Amber Laurent is cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. What happened after I passed out? Victoria sat down heavily. Everything. Blake tried to leave the courtroom. The deputies stopped him. Trevor tried to run. They caught him in the parking garage. And Amber completely broke down. Confessed everything. Everything. Blake approached her 18 months ago, offered her money to pretend to be his pregnant mistress. He thought if you believed he was leaving you for someone else, you'd divorce him quietly. He'd keep most of his assets, and he'd eventually ghost Amber too. But Amber and Trevor decided to run their own scam. They started a real affair. Amber got pregnant with Trevor's baby, and they planned to extort child support from Blake. Madison's head spun. So Blake never actually loved her. It was all fake. All of it. Blake's only love is money. He increased your life insurance because he thought you might die in childbirth. Natural causes? Big payout? No questions asked. When you didn't die naturally, he started researching ways to make it look natural. Stress-induced complications. Preeclampsia. Things that happen to pregnant women all the time. He was going to kill me, Madison said numbly. Or let you die. The legal distinction matters, apparently. But yes, Blake was willing to let you die for $3 million. Madison looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. What happens now? Now Blake goes to trial. The DA is pushing for maximum sentencing. Between the fraud charges and the attempted murder investigation, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. His assets are seized, the offshore accounts, the insurance policy, everything. It all comes back to you as restitution. And Amber, 3 years probation plus restitution. She has to testify against both Blake and Trevor. In exchange, she keeps her baby and stays out of prison. She didn't know about the life insurance plot. No, she and Trevor were running their own scam, but they genuinely didn't know Blake was planning something much worse. When she found out in court, that's when she broke, told the investigators everything. Madison processed this slowly. So everyone was lying to everyone. Pretty much. Blake lied to you and Amber. Amber and Trevor lied to Blake. It was a whole web of deception, and you were the only honest person in the middle of it. Victoria paused. Madison, I need to tell you something else. Blake's mother contacted me, Patricia Thornton. She wants to meet her granddaughter. She says she had no idea what Blake was planning, and she wants to make amends. Madison thought about that. Blake's mother, her daughter's grandmother. Tell her I'll think about it. But not yet. Not until after the trial. Wait, I need time. Of course, after Victoria left. Harper came back in. You have another visitor. Are you up for it? Who? Amber Laurent. Madison's first instinct was to say no, but then she thought about that bathroom confrontation, about Amber's face when she realized she'd been lied to, about how they'd both been victims of Blake's manipulation in different ways. Okay, Madison said, but stay with me. Amber walked in slowly, visibly pregnant now, her face blotchy from crying. She stopped a few feet from the bed. I'm sorry, Amber said immediately. For everything. For the affair that wasn't really an affair. For believing Blake's lies about you. For laughing in that courtroom. I didn't know about the life insurance. I swear I didn't know he wanted you dead. Madison looked at her. This woman who'd been a villain in her story but was really just another person Blake had used. I believe you, Madison said quietly. But that doesn't make what you did okay. You still participated in destroying my life. I know, and I can't take it back. But I want you to know that I'm testifying against him. I'm making sure he goes to prison. For you. For what he tried to do to you. For yourself too, Madison said. Because if I had died, you and Trevor would have been next. Blake doesn't leave loose ends. Amber nodded, tears streaming down her face. I was so stupid. I thought I was special. I thought he chose me. He didn't choose anyone. He just uses people. Madison shifted her baby in her arms. What are you going to do now? Have my baby. Try to be a good mother. Try to make better choices. Amber looked at Madison's daughter. She's beautiful. Thank you. What are you going to name her? Madison looked down at her daughter, this tiny person who'd survived so much already, who'd fought through stress and bleeding and her mother's breaking body, who'd refused to give up. Emma? Madison said. Her name is Emma. Amber smiled sadly. That's perfect. She turned to leave, then paused. Madison, I hope someday you can forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I hope anyway. Madison didn't respond. Forgiveness felt too big right now, too complicated. Maybe someday, but not today. After Amber left, Harper sat back down. How are you really doing? I don't know, Madison admitted. I should feel happy. We won. Blake is going to prison. I got everything, but I just feel empty. That's grief. You spent 12 years with him. You can't just turn that off. I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was. Is that crazy? No, that's human. Madison looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her father was a monster. How do I tell her when she's old enough to ask? How do I explain that her father tried to kill me? You tell her the truth, age-appropriate truth, and you show her what real love looks like. That's all you can do. Mom, that night, alone with Emma for the first time, Madison made a promise. She would protect her daughter. She would raise her to be strong, to trust her instincts, to never accept less than she deserved. She would show her that surviving wasn't the same as living, but it was the first step toward it. And she would make sure Emma knew one thing above all else: her mother had fought for her, had survived for her, had refused to give up even when everything was falling apart. That was love, real, messy, imperfect love, and it was worth more than any lie Blake had ever told. 6 months after Emma was born, Madison stood in the courthouse for the last time, Blake's sentencing hearing. She didn't have to be here. Victoria had told her that. But Madison wanted to be present for this, wanted to look Blake in the eye one final time and see him face the consequences of his actions. The courtroom was packed. Media, court watchers, everyone wanted to see the investment banker who tried to murder his pregnant wife for insurance money. Blake was led in wearing prison orange, his hands cuffed. He looked thin, older. When he saw Madison, something flickered across his face. Not remorse, something more like resentment. Judge Crawford presided. Mr. Thornton, you've been found guilty on multiple counts: conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, attempted murder, financial exploitation. The prosecution has recommended 25 years. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Blake stood. Yes, Your Honor. He turned to look at Madison. Madison, I never meant for any of this to happen. I made mistakes. I let my fear of being trapped control me. But I never actually wanted you dead. You have to believe that. Madison stared at him, even now, even after everything. He was lying. He genuinely believed he could manipulate his way out of this. I don't believe you, Madison said clearly, and I don't forgive you. Blake's mask cracked. Everything I did because you forced my hand. You were suffocating me. The marriage was dead years ago as I just wanted out. Then you should have gotten a divorce, like a normal person, not researched how to profit from my death. I was planning for worst-case scenarios. That's what responsible people do. Responsible people don't increase their spouse's life insurance to $3 million and then search for pregnancy complications. Blake's attorney put a hand on his arm, trying to get him to sit down, but Blake shook him off. You want to know the truth, Madison? Fine, I did resent you. I resented every appointment, every failed treatment, every time you cried over another negative test. I resented being tied to someone who couldn't give me what I wanted. So yes, I looked for ways out, but I never would have actually killed you. You just would have let nature take its course, Madison said softly. Let me die from pregnancy complications and collected the insurance money. That's not much better. Blake, Judge Crawford's gavel came down. That's enough, Thornton, sit down. Blake sat, his face red, his carefully controlled mask completely shattered. I've heard enough, Judge Crawford said. Mr. Thornton, your actions were calculated, deliberate, and cruel. You manipulated multiple people, stole marital assets, and planned to profit from your wife's potential death. The psychological harm you've caused is immeasurable. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Additionally, Marsane, I'm terminating your parental rights. You will have no contact with your daughter, ever. Do you understand? Your Honor, that's my child. You gave up the right to call her your child when you tried to kill her mother. Emma Thornton will grow up without you, and that's for the best. Judge Crawford looked at Madison. Mrs. Thornton, the court apologizes for what you've endured. You and your daughter deserve better. I hope you find peace. The gavel came down one final time. Blake was led away, still protesting, still trying to argue his way out of consequences that had finally caught up to him. Madison stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. It was over. Really over. Blake would spend the next 15 years minimum in prison. Emma would never know him, and Madison could finally start rebuilding her life. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Madison had prepared a statement, brief and to the point. Justice was served today. My daughter and I are safe, and we're moving forward with our lives. To anyone in a similar situation, know this, you are stronger than you think. You can serve it, you can rebuild. And you deserve better than someone who sees you as disposable. Thank you. Well, she walked away, ignoring the shouted questions, and climbed into Harper's car. How do you feel? Harper asked. Free, Madison said. For the first time in years, I actually feel free. They drove to Madison's new apartment. She'd sold the penthouse, couldn't bear to live in the space she'd shared with Blake. This place was smaller but brighter, with big windows and a view of the park. Emma's room was painted yellow, filled with books and toys and everything a baby needed to grow up happy and loved. Patricia Thornton was already there, babysitting. She stood when Madison entered, her expression cautious. How did it go? Patricia asked. 25 years. Parental rights terminated. Patricia's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my son did. Madison had spent months deciding how she felt about Patricia, Blake's mother, who'd raised a monster but hadn't known what he'd become, who'd reached out after the arrest, offering support and apologies and asking for a chance to know her granddaughter. It's not your fault, Madison said finally. You couldn't have known. I should have seen the signs, the entitlement, the coldness, but I didn't want to see them. None of us wanted to see them. That's how people like Blake operate. Patricia looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her portable crib. She looks like him. I know, but she'll be nothing like him. I'll make sure of it. Can I still visit? I know I don't deserve. Yes, Madison said to him. You can visit Emma deserves to know her grandmother, the good parts of Blake's family. Patricia hugged her, crying. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a second chance. After Patricia left, Madison picked up Emma and carried her to the rocking chair by the window. The late afternoon sun streamed in, warm and golden. Emma opened her eyes, focused on Madison's face, and smiled. Hi, baby girl, Madison whispered. Your daddy's going to be gone for a long time. And I'm not sorry about that, but I am sorry you'll grow up without a father. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that. Emma grabbed Madison's finger, held on tight. But you'll have me, Madison continued, and you'll have Harper and Grandma Patricia and a whole community of people who love you. You'll have everything you need, I promise. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. The settlement came through. $2.1 million in restitution, plus the house sale. You and Emma are financially secure for life. Madison looked around her apartment, at the life she was building from the ashes of her old one. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd believed in 12 years ago when she married Blake, but it was real. It was hers, and that was enough. That evening, Harper came over with dinner. They sat on the couch, eating Thai food and watching Emma play on her activity mat, and for the first time in months, Madison laughed. Really laughed. Deep and genuine. What's funny? Harper asked. I was just thinking. Blake spent months planning how to get rid of me. He researched, he schemed, he manipulated, and in the end, I'm the one who got everything. The money, the freedom, our daughter. He lost everything he thought he was so cleverly protecting. Karma's a bitch, Harper said. No, justice is a bitch, and I'm here for it. They clinked their wine glasses together. toasting survival, friendship, and new beginnings. Later, after Harper left and Emma was asleep, Madison sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She'd been thinking about this for weeks. A blog, a support group, something to help other women in situations like hers. Women who were being financially abused, emotionally manipulated, or worse. She typed, "You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you can survive this." It wasn't much, just a beginning. But sometimes beginnings were enough. Madison saved the document, shut her laptop, and went to check on Emma one more time. Her daughter slept peacefully, one small hand curled into a fist, breathing steady and strong. "We made it," Madison whispered. "We survived, and now we get to live." She turned off the light and walked to her own bedroom. The first good night's sleep in months finally within reach. The nightmare was over. The healing could begin. And Madison Hayes, survivor, mother, warrior, was finally free.